It is Wednesday, November 27th, 2024, and this is episode 11 of Night Talk. Tonight, Trump drops the tariff bomb on Canada, fallout from last Friday's protest turned riot here in Montreal, and seniors angry about being snubbed by the Trudeau government. I'm Gary MacDonald.
And I'm Eddie Kalik from Los Angeles today.
You do get around. I'll say that for you, Eddie.
Well, Gary, you have to stop sending me on these personal assignments. What can I tell you?
How are things in L.A.?
They're going well. We're down here visiting relatives, getting ready for the American Thanksgiving holiday, and let me tell you, they really know about Thanksgiving holiday. So we're trying to get into a festive mood here, and doing a lot of grocery shopping today, a lot of cooking, and should be about 25 of us tomorrow.
Okay, so the Macy's parade tomorrow on TV and lots of football as well.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Alrighty, so U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. You know what, before we start that, I just have to take a moment. And Eddie and I are really kind of beaming today because the show in the past week, last week's show, has set a new record for us for our channel, and as you know, as I stated, this is only episode 11, and we're really kind of over the moon about it. And we want to thank all of you, whether you've watched live or you've watched the repeat of the live show, or you've gone over to our YouTube channel to watch the polished version of the show. Thank you so much. We've had some comments on the YouTube channel page. We've received a number of likes, even some thumbs down, and that's okay, because we're not going to be hitting everybody's wavelength in a show like this. So by all means, thank you to everyone for taking the time to check us out, and hopefully all of you will be back. We've picked up some new subscribers this week as well, Eddie, and wow, it's just been really something else. So thanks very much, everyone. Okay, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has sent shockwaves across Canada. Late Monday, he said he would impose a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods on day one of his presidency. He also promised the same treatment for Mexico and China. Now, yesterday, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was quick off the mark during question period in the Commons.
Plan for economy and security that puts Canada first. But despite the fact the Prime Minister has known for years that Trump was threatening these tariffs, and for 3 weeks that President Trump had won the election, the only plan he has is a Zoom call. No plan to reverse his disastrous liberalization of drugs that have killed people and now threaten our borders. No plan to fix the broken borders that he caused. No plan to cancel the tax increases that will drive billions and many jobs away. Where's the plan to put Canada first?
Instead of panicking and falling back on slogans like the leader of the opposition, we rolled up our sleeves and we're getting to work. We're working with all the premiers, pulling together in a Team Canada approach, because that's how we defend Canadian jobs from coast to coast to coast. I spoke with Donald Trump yesterday evening, talked about how important it was for us to work together to solve some of the challenges we're facing as a continent, as countries, but also work to grow our economy, protect our workers on both sides of the border. This is the responsible, methodical approach we're taking as we move forward, while our opponent falls back on slogans and fear.
He spoke with the incoming president, and moments later, Mr. Trump put out a tweet slapping a 25% tariff on Canada. So that worked about as well as the Prime Minister's efforts on Buy America and softwood lumber, which continue to be penalized, even though the previous Conservative government got both of those things lifted. Now move over to drugs. The Prime Minister's disastrous legalization and liberalization of drugs has the Americans worried, in addition to costing 47,000 deaths in Canada. Where's the plan to stop the drugs and keep our border open to trade?
Mr. Speaker, once again, the leader of the opposition is just making stuff up. I clearly spoke with the President of the United States an hour and a half after he put out his suggestion on tariffs. The reality is we're going to continue to work constructively with the incoming administration to protect Canadian jobs, to protect Canadian growth, not to take the responsible approach that isn't steeped in partisanship, that pulls together the Team Canada approach that stands up for Canadians instead of throwing our arms up and saying all is broken like the leader of the opposition.
Wow. So they were off to a roaring start, for sure. Now, here's the thing. It's a 25% tariff on all goods going into the U.S. The other side of it is, it's only now, I think, where a lot of our friends on the other side of the border are beginning to realize, wait a minute, this is going to mean higher prices. I heard a story today about an older woman who owns a little hardware store. I think it's a family operation somewhere in New York City. And she is telling all of her customers to buy up what they can now, because if these tariffs go on, some of the tools they get from Canada, and she listed off a number of things, and then other things that they get from Mexico and in China, will all be costing much more once those tariffs go on early in the new year, if Trump carries through with his threat. Now, in the meantime, on our side of the border, what does it mean? Well, it means all of a sudden there's going to be a decreased demand for our goods, and in some cases services that we provide, like probably some software as services, kinds of operations. It never really sank in to people in the U.S. what he was saying when he was saying about tariffs, and in one speech, which drew a loud round of applause and cheers, was tariff is my favorite word in the dictionary.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this, a couple of times during our Trump episodes, and I think we did 2 or 3 on that. I think we beat the horse to death, and still some more beating to happen later on as the 4 years go on. It was a lot of discussion about tariffs. A lot of his platform and a lot of his campaign rallies was all about the immigrant issue, the drugs, the smuggling, the criminals, and tariffs. He said he was going to tariff the hell out of everyone. He's going to make America great again. And what never came out of his mouth is any sort of explanation to potential voters, or those that are going to vote for him just the same, about what a tariff exactly is. And quite frankly, I am not convinced that most of the people that voted for President Trump understand the implications of a tariff. A country is not going to pay anything on a tariff. It's the importers that essentially end up paying for the tariff. And when the importers' operating costs increase, the only way they can survive and sustain their profit margins, of course, is to increase the prices at the retail side of it, at the till. And as you mentioned, this lady in New York is forewarning her customers that better buy now because it's going to cost a hell of a lot later. Maybe this old lady or this elderly woman who's running this hardware store won't be able to stay in business because of this. So, how many businesses, mom and pop shops, are going to close because of this, because of decreased business, or decreased profitability, increased expenses? And B, Gary, you're absolutely right. What's that going to happen to us here in Canada in terms of less business flowing over the borders, because importers are not going to be bringing in as much supplies as they'd like to? So it's ugly, both sides of the house. There is I can't see any upside to this, at least for the common person like you and I see zero upside to this.
No, it's certainly, there will be no winners in this at all. Now, the other thing of it is, it came out the other day as well that one of the most searched terms on Google on Monday was the word tariff. People don't understand what a tariff is, apparently, and really never thought any more about it. And it goes back again, Eddie, to what I have said in the past. With democracy comes responsibility at the individual level. You just don't go blindly following along on these campaign promises and extravaganzas and what have you. You have to do some homework. You can't rely even on the media, the legacy media, or even on digital platforms to do the fact checking. You have to do the fact checking, and you have to come to your own conclusion as to whether you feel it's beneficial or not, as to how you're going to place your vote when it comes time to mark that X. I just don't get it. And the other thing I don't get is how he got away with that, it seemed, day after day after day, and not challenged. I did not see, now I may have missed it because, I can't watch all legacy media, but I don't recall him really being challenged on the issue of tariffs whenever he threw it out there during a rally. I just don't remember that.
Yeah, and you know what? Typically, he's not going to get anybody. I don't think you'd see anybody challenging him on his own stage during a rally, because I think they'd be quickly escorted. So that's problem one. Problem two, when he's effectively being interviewed by the media, pretty much the only coverage he gave was any right-wing media outlet that would listen to him, just let him go on and rant, so there was no challenging there. When he sat down with Insanity Hannity, no questions were raised, or there was no challenge to anything Mr. Trump was saying, especially when he brought up the tariffs. He didn't challenge him at all in terms of what does a tariff mean to the American population. It's just that I'm going to tariff China, I'm going to tariff Canada and Mexico, and so on and so forth, without elaborating one way or the other what kind of an impact there's going to be. And then the third problem, I think, as you mentioned, the mainstream media, I don't think that they got enough time with Mr. Trump in a forum setting where they can actually question him. What do you mean by tariffs? Or can you please elaborate what a tariff means to the common person in the United States? I don't think, unless I missed it, I don't think there was any sort of a platform or show or anything like that with what we would call our mainstream media, anything but Fox media, actually questioning him on that. And then you had the two debates. The issue of tariffs came up. Not once did the moderator take the opportunity to ask President Trump to clarify that. Even if he did ask him to clarify tariffs, he probably wouldn't have answered it anyway and gone off someplace else in terms of his comments. So, yeah, I agree with you. There is a lot of opportunity lost on multiple occasions to question him on the tariff issue amongst the dozens others that he basically just rallied off, a lot of his nonsense that he was spewing out. There was really no one there to challenge him at that given moment to make any sense to a lot of people that are looking for answers. I mean, I know you and I are Canadian, but, it would have been nice to have heard some answers. And you know what, we got an election coming up, and Mr. Poilievre and a lot of his showboating, he's going to have to start answering some questions. And I know that our media here in Canada, I'm confident that our media in Canada are gonna bring this out to the forefront so that you and I can put the X in the proper box, right? And like you were saying, it's important to inform ourselves of what our politicians are up to and what they're planning for us, because it does impact us.
Now, the other side of it, Eddie, is that throwing the 25% figure out there may be a ploy on Trump's part, because, he likes to shake things up and use threats to get what he ultimately wants. I mean, the U.S. Mexican-Canadian trade deal that was negotiated during his first time around to replace the North American Free Trade Agreement comes up for discussion and renewal, I believe, in 2026. So if I'm understanding it correctly, this tariff would, for all intents and purposes, violate the terms and agreement of the USMC.
Correct.
And how does he think he's going to get away with that? However, on the other side of it, it may be that our Prime Minister and the President of Mexico, will feel, well, we don't have a whole lot of wiggle room here, so let's go in and see what he wants, and let's see if we can give him what he wants to salvage our economies and either have no tariffs placed on us, or at least reduce the level of the tariff to reduce the impact on the economies. But the other thing is too, Eddie, and I'm certainly no economist by any stretch of the imagination, but it seems to me that if our economy begins to suffer and the Mexican economy begins to suffer, that's going to have an impact overall too on the U.S. economy, I would think.
Absolutely, yeah.
So is he just throwing this out there as he does a whole lot of things from time to time? And by the time he goes through his inauguration and gets into office, will his temperament have eased a bit on this issue? And maybe he is still looking for something, but he's not going to throw it at us the way he's throwing it at us now. And here in Canada, Trudeau's on the phone right now, or the call may be wrapping up, but I suspect he's probably still on the phone right now. I guess it's a Zoom call with all of the premiers and territorial leaders to discuss this and discuss the move, what the next move is going to be. And the one thing for sure is, one of the things I agree with Trudeau on is, when we're dealing with this, we all have to be speaking and singing from the same hymn book. Right. We can't have Alberta going off in one area and Ontario going off in another, and Quebec doing it. It has to be a totally unified approach, and don't even try to soften it with Team Canada talk. Call it what it is. We're coming in with all of our guns blazing as well, Mr. President. So you better be prepared to sit down and listen.
Yeah, Gary, I've been doing a little bit of traveling, so maybe I haven't caught up on all my news yet. Didn't this 25% discussion get brought up by Donald Trump as an afterthought to some of the comments he was making in terms of the number of illegal immigrants that are flowing in from other countries through Canada into the United States, to the effect that if we don't remedy it, that he will impose 25% tariffs? Am I incorrect or correct in saying that?
I believe you're correct in saying that. The flow of people coming over our borders and heading south has always been an irritant, a thorn in the side for Donald Trump. And you know what? Rightly so, when you consider some of the things that have been happening even in our own country, which we'll be getting to in segment 2. But there's that, and of course, he brought up the issue of illegal drugs this time around. The fentanyl coming through from both Mexico and Canada. And of course, Poilievre in question period the other day used that as an opportunity to jump on the Liberal government's drug program here in Canada, and making drugs available in safe sites and those sorts of things. And Poilievre jumped all over that. He's not going to miss an opportunity to take a shot for sure.
Right.
Yes, I personally think that program is failing in a whole lot of ways. I don't know if it's responsible for an increase in fentanyl coming across the border, through the Canadian-U.S. border. I'm not convinced on that. However, it could be that the cartels do have some kind of supply chain coming in through Canada. And it could even be just, the same as they're sending stolen cars out to the Mideast. It's coming in on shipping containers somewhere and, and finding its way across. So, that's a whole other side of the story. And again, when you go in to sit down with Donald Trump, he's going to have all of this laid out, and he's just going to be hammering away at it and throwing it at you and beating you down. I've watched a couple of tech shows, and there have been a couple of articles written about tech articles written as well about the impact on the tech industry and companies like Apple. And you may recall that under Trump's first go-around in office, Apple did end up building a new facility, I think it was Texas, but where they were assembling MacBooks. Because most of the parts were coming in from offshore still. But it was somewhat of a peace offering, and Trump seemed to accept that. And then there were the tariffs on goods coming in, technical goods coming in from offshore. And Tim Cook actually went to the White House, sat down and had dinner with Donald Trump. And the way he approached it was, what you're going to do is these tariffs are going to make our iPhones much more expensive here in the US. And that means that our chief competitor, Samsung, is going to be able to come in and still undercut us and cut into our sales here at home. And Trump thought about it, and then he relaxed the tariff on the iPhones. But those are the sorts of things that we're looking at, and it's too bad that Christian's on his way back to Switzerland tonight. Yeah. Because
I'd to hear from him.
Yeah, to get it from a resource standpoint, and he was at some kind of a mining conference in Ottawa last week, so it would have been great. But once he gets over there and gets settled away, maybe we can get him on in the next week or two and get his take on it from that perspective, because there's no question Trump's looking at Canada and as a source for a number of goods as far as natural resources are concerned, including our water. He's not interested really, I guess, in our oil and our gas. He wants to be self-sufficient on that end. And I don't blame him on that. I think here in Canada, we've blown the opportunity to be self-sufficient ourselves, especially when Energy East died, so that you couldn't get a lot of that heavy oil from Alberta to the east to be refined, especially in Canada's largest refinery in New Brunswick.
Right.
It makes no sense. So, I can't wait to see what comes out of the Zoom call tonight and how it's going to go. And I can't wait to see if Trudeau can keep the premiers and the territorial leaders on side, so that we continue to speak with one voice and not start to break off in different directions and just weaken our whole approach.
Yeah.
Now, Eddie, you've been in the States for a couple of days now, and aside from this, which really just broke on Monday, do you hear any sort of chatter at all now that the dust has settled following the election?
Well, I've met the cousins here, and a friend, and I've mentioned before on one of our earlier broadcasts that they are Republican voters, and they expressed to me that after the election they were registered Republicans. Let me correct that. They are registered Republicans, not that they necessarily voted for the Republican Party this time around. They were absolutely flabbergasted and extremely saddened for a few days after the election results came in, and not somewhat, but very, very concerned. What does this mean for Americans? What does this mean for California? A lot of, there was some talk, we briefly talked about the immigration issue. Our groceries are probably going to go up if Trump follows through on his threats in exporting 11 million immigrants from the United States, mostly of which work in areas that make sure that the general population in America has groceries and vegetables on their tables, and these are the people that are working on the farms. So, yeah, there is a very big concern about what's next for us. Being 60 years of age plus, what does this all mean for our kids who are trying to buy homes here in California, young professionals, and more than anything, what does this mean for our grandkids? And I think there's a genuine concern that over the next 4 years, that whatever Donald Trump does is going to have a lasting legacy far beyond 4 years for his mandate, that this can have consequential repercussions over the next 8 to 12 years if he follows through on a lot of his rhetoric. So there's the folks that I've spoken to here are worried. Tomorrow should be interesting, as I understand there are going to be a few Trump supporters that are going to be around the table. So I certainly hope that we don't get into any sort of political discussions. But genuinely, all I've been exposed to so far with the people I've spoken to is genuine worry. And just one final comment, Gary, on what's Mr. Trump trying to do with all of this. He's always boasted himself as a master of the deal, the art of the deal, and you could very well be right. He's positioning himself, he's posturing, he's beating his chest, and then perhaps, like you said, once they actually sit down and have formal discussion, some serious dialogue, maybe he's going to back off on this and ensure there's some sort of a compromise that's going to work on behalf of himself first. It's always himself first, and then the United States. So it could be just posturing and chest beating at this point, as far as I can figure this out, Gary.
We'd only be so lucky, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's certainly something we're going to be following very closely, because, man, oh man, even if it's 10%, it's still, the economy is still, pretty fragile in a lot of ways, and the North American economy is still pretty fragile in a lot of ways, and nobody wants to go back and start worrying about the R word again, recession, and dealing with a recession at this stage. So we will follow that story and again, look for your input. So if you have any comments, by all means, even as we wrap up this segment, post them and we'll share them with everyone. And if not, and you're watching the recorded version later on, by all means, leave a comment below, and we'll have a look at it as well. Okay, last Friday night was not a pretty night here in Montreal for a lot of reasons, and here is just an example of what I'm talking about. And that was the scene last Friday night outside the Palais de Congrès, where a NATO parliamentary meeting was underway. In the aftermath, questions about the police response and the status of those responsible for the protest going off the rails. And of course, in the Commons on Monday during question period, questions about the Prime Minister
The lawless hate riot that we saw on the streets of Montreal is what happens after 9 years of a woke prime minister pushing radical woke identity politics, dividing people by race, gender, vaccine status, religion, and more. On top of dividing, he erases our heroes and history, saying Canada has no core identity. He opened the borders to terrorists and lawbreakers. The results? Assassinations on Canadian soil, firebombings and terrorist attacks against places of worship, 251% more hate crime. It wasn't like this before this Prime Minister and won't be after he's gone. Why not an election so we can fix what he broke?
Mr. Speaker, I personally believe that it is shameful that anyone would speak of the violence that took place on our streets here in Canada in political terms for purely partisan political intention. Mr. Speaker, I believe it is all of our responsibility to stand up to such hatred and to condemn it in the strongest possible terms, unequivocally and on behalf of all decent Canadians.
The Prime Minister wasn't in the House on Monday for question period. That's why Bill Blair and a couple of the other ministers responded to the questions. Now, my understanding is of this whole scenario is that there was a protest earlier in the day, and again it was a pro-Palestinian protest that resulted in a franchisee, a Second Cup franchisee, losing her franchise immediately because of her role in that particular protest. Then in the evening, it was an anti-NATO protest that was parading through the streets. And there were some pro-Palestinian protesters, and they kind of came together. And then once that happened, there were some bad actors within the group, and that's when it went to hell. And not only did they beat on windows and smash windows out, they also smashed windows out in some nearby businesses, and they torched 2 vehicles parked on the street. Now, police made 3 arrests that evening, and I believe they may have made 1 more since then, and they say more are pending as they have a chance to review the various tapes that they have from the cameras all around the area. And they get into being able to identify people more, plus other information they have. But I sit back, and the police chief defended his officers and how they handled it. Initially, some of the video on social media, it looked like they were totally outnumbered. And then there was one piece of video I saw on social media just yesterday where there was a much larger response around than what we saw in that particular video clip that I played, which was all over X and Facebook and everywhere else. And they had officers on bicycles. They had officers, did they have them on horses? There may have been some horses there too. But they also came out with the shields, batons, tear gas, or as they called it in the news release, chemical irritants. And so they moved as quickly as possible to round these people up and funnel them down the street and get them to break up. And the police chief said, our officers have dealt with, I think he said something like 500 protests of various sizes and degrees over the last year. And he said, most of those have gone well. He said, we get one like this, and just like all of the credibility seems to have gone out the window and everybody's all over them. But my question is, this was a NATO parliamentary meeting. So we had people in from all over Europe. There's a federal responsibility at that level, I would think. And there's also, with that federal responsibility at that level comes, you've got the RCMP involved, you have CSIS who would be involved with the intel coming in. And local Montreal police would, especially after the last year or so with the, pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli protests, they would have their own level of intel as well. How did we not kind of get a handle on that this could go off the rails and turn out violent the way it did? How did we not have a handle on that? And how did we not have a much stronger police presence before the protest even started?
I really don't know how to answer or comment on that one, Gary. I think everything you're saying is how come are good questions, because for something like this, you would figure. The NATO meeting at the Palais de Congrès, that's not something that was planned in the last 2 weeks. This is something that's planned months, maybe a year ahead of time, right? And knowing Montreal was going to be the hosting city, you would figure the police and security bodies you mentioned before, RCMP, the CSIS, local police authorities here in Montreal, and even the SQ, Sûreté Québec, should have all been sitting around the table already planning for the worst. It seems to me they're planning for the best. Let's just, everything's going to go fine. We'll just deploy the minimum amount of manpower, and it should all be okay, until it's not. Was the police force outnumbered by the number of protesters? Absolutely. Were the police outnumbered by the number of violent protesters? Absolutely not. And the majority of those protesters were peaceful. And rightly, they have an opportunity and a privilege to protest. That's one of the nice things about our country. But as long as it's not violent, we've talked about this, I think, episode 4, show 4, about you have every right to protest as long as you stay within the confines of civil obedience and the confines of the law. You don't start injuring people or breaking property. So my opinion of this, Gary, is I agree with you. They should have planned for this a long time ago, not look at the bottom line pocketbooks for how much overtime it's going to cost. If the city of Montreal has been designated to host a major international event such as this NATO meeting, there's no such thing as pockets not deep enough. You pay for the overtime and you make sure that the police forces there are necessary to deal with what if possibility, which happened on Friday night. The second point I'd like to make, based on what I've seen in the video and what I've seen in the papers here and in back home, is the police are always blamed for when something goes wrong and there is violence, as you've shown in the clips. Okay, it's not the police officer's fault, and we've talked about this before. This comes to the leadership of the various police forces in giving them the necessary tools, preparation, and at the end of the day, orders to make sure that protests are within the confines of a peaceful protest. And I'm sorry, along with that, the authority to arrest on the spot. That's just my opinion. Like I said, the police force outnumbered the violent protesters, in my opinion. Those 4 individuals that were smashing glass with hammers, to me, that's 4 arrests, not 3 arrests. One day later, we're going to be looking at more videotape, and maybe we'll have more arrests. This is arrest on the spot, because it ensures the safety of the rest of the protesters. It ensures the safety of anybody behind those doors, and it ensures the safety of anybody in the streets by getting rid of these violent protesters. And it's a handful of them. And you know what? The police officers didn't fail in their jobs. Their leaders, the various leaders of the police forces fail in their jobs. The mayor of Montreal failed in her responsibility, as the police chief reports directly into her. And you know what? Up to Mr. Legault and up to Mr. Trudeau for not ensuring that the higher ups had their particular intelligence available to them and their police forces at the ready to support the Montreal Police Department. So good job, frontline police officers. You did the best with what you can. You did the best with what you had in terms of orders. And shame on you, our leaders and politicians, for not allowing the police to do their jobs, for arresting these people and taking care of what needs to be taken care of, throw them in jail, and then understand whether they're citizens here or not, are the university students here or not, and revoke some of these privileges. There just doesn't seem to be any consequences to these individuals taking these horrible actions on breaking property and, you know, burning police cruisers or burning vehicles and whatnot. It's just wrong. It shouldn't be happening in our country, Gary. It just shouldn't.
And we have a comment. Deborah says, Canadians protest peacefully, so people will listen. If you behave like this in my country, I do not hear you. Point well taken.
True.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, Eddie, I'm thinking about 2 years ago, remember we hosted, it was some kind of climate change conference, and it had been delayed a year or so because of COVID, and it was an international conference. And I recall because I was going to, and it was in that same area at the Palais de Congrès, and I was going to the hospital at the time on a regular basis. And I remember there were stories in the media about streets being closed off, 2 days or so before the conference started. And when, you were going through that area, even up to René Lévesque, there were streets that were blocked off. You couldn't get down into that area at all. And there was a very heavy security perimeter set up around the area. They did have some protests, but they were well prepared for the protests. I think there were a couple of windows broken along the way, but they were quickly arrested, scooped out, and moved on. And it was nothing like what we saw there Friday night, and nothing like we have seen in some of these other protests over the last year or so. And then you look at what happened on the October 7th, marking the beginning of the war, when Hamas attacked Israel, and look at what happened in Vancouver, for example. And there was all kinds of puffery in the comments about, this is not what we're about, and we are not going to put up with this, blah, blah. Obviously, nothing has changed because, look, it happened again. And don't for a minute think, and you're not going to convince me, that these 4, 5, 6 people, they are, Mayor Valerie Plante had it right. She said, they're professionals, professional vandals or whatever. They're a little bit more than professional vandals. They're professional, all right. And I would suggest that they are probably being funded offshore. The same as some of these other protests that we encountered from last October through till the summer with the encampments and that. Somebody had to be funding and covering off some of the costs of food and everything else for these protesters and these college kids who got wrapped up and sucked into it somehow. I'm sorry, and some people may say, oh yeah, you're spouting conspiracy theories. No, I'm just kind of putting something out there for us to be thinking about because the world has changed. I don't think there's a conspiracy to it. I think we have to realize that, well, our law enforcement agencies now are talking about radicalization of our youth online. It's happening. Yeah. It's here. It's in front of us. We have to deal with it. And just sort of like, well, we had 500 demonstrations and we did well. And kudos. Yes. but there was one that didn't go well. And what have we learned? What did we learn from the truckers' protest? Or it really wasn't a truckers' protest at the end of it, but what did we learn from that?
Yeah.
You know, what have we learned from dealing with COVID? I don't think we've learned a lot at the political level, because I would bet $1 to a donut that if another pandemic hits us in 2 years, God forbid, we're going to be pretty much, at least in this country, pretty much in the same boat that we were in when COVID-19 hit. We had nothing. We were scrambling. We weren't prepared. And I don't see in some jurisdictions, COVID was used as a way for some politicians to gain control over public health and diminish the role of public health within their jurisdictions. That's a whole other issue that we'll get onto some other day. I'll stop. But we have to just stop pretending that it's all rosy in this country, because it's not. We're living in a very different world now than what we were a year ago, than what we were 2 years ago, and than what we were since 2001, September 11th, 2001. It's a very, very different world. And it's time that we got on board and started paying attention.
I agree with Gary, 100%.
And I'll think we'll leave it at that for now. I'm sure we'll have some more discussion on this going down the road. Coming up is the segment that I'm sure a lot of people have been waiting for, and we do have an update on this particular issue. And that is the tax holiday that the Prime Minister is giving us as a Christmas present.
Canadians been through a lot. They work hard. We see that. We've been able to get through the past couple of years. Everyone had to tighten their belts a little bit. And now we're going to be able to give a tax break for all Canadians. For 2 months, starting December 14th, we're going to remove the GST, HST from groceries. 100% of groceries, all groceries. We're going to remove the GST from restaurant meals, takeouts, fast food. Removing the GST from beer and wine. Removing the GST for essentials like kids' clothing, footwear, diapers, and toys. All tax-free. Removing the GST and HST. For 2 months, Canadians are going to get a real break on everything they do. We also know that there's more we need to do, particularly for working Canadians. So if you worked in 2023 and earned up to $150,000, we're going to be sending you a check for $250 in just a few months.
So that was last Monday when he announced this. And right out of the gate, you had a number of premiers, including those who have agreements in place with the federal government to harmonize their provincial sales tax with the GST, and New Brunswick and Alberta are two of them. So the premiers are saying they didn't get any real advance notice on this, that they basically learned at the same time as the rest of us. He goes to a small grocery store somewhere in Ontario to make the announcement, and there are pictures of him peeking around the corners of shelves with, loaded with food, and I'm just, my God, stop it. Like, just stop. And he needs this bill passed before December 14th, because the tax holiday is going to run between December 14th and mid-February. And of course, Parliament has been in a filibuster for 2 months now, So nothing has happened other really than question period and some committee meetings. Anyhow, out of that comes the NDP saying, at first they were all for it, and then Jagmeet Singh comes back and says, well, we can't really support this because of the fact that it's tied to the $250 check that they're going to send out in early April. And we're going to get into that one in a minute. And then they said, well, if they break those two apart, then we can support the tax side of it. And our bloc leader said the same thing. I can't support that with the tied to the $250 and not everybody getting the $250. Anyway, late this afternoon, the NDP agreed to come on board, and so the bill will be introduced, I believe, tomorrow. And the NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, says it can be passed by Thursday. Oh, that's tomorrow. Okay. Yeah. It can be done by tomorrow. Okay. There are a lot of issues around that because some of the provinces who have these harmonized deals with the feds say, well, you know what? This is going to be millions of dollars in loss to us. We have an agreement. We want our money. We want to know. Because Trudeau wants the provinces to give a tax holiday on their side of it as well.
Right.
Don't you think you would consult with the provinces before you announce this? What kind of fairy world are you in? Anyway, however, let's get to the $250 snub of seniors and disabled people.
Yeah.
Because the $250 will only be for Canadians who were working as of 2023, and it will not be for seniors, and it will not be for disabled. Now, I think it was Chrystia Freeland today or yesterday, in trying to defend this, said, well, we have a certain percentage of disabled people in this country who are working. Well, that's, okay. And there is a certain percentage of retired people who are working part-time, but they're working. And probably working to supplement their overall income. Mm-hmm. But you have a large group of seniors who have worked all their lives and paid taxes all their lives, and are still paying taxes on their drawdowns, for their pensions and such. And people who are disabled, or people who are on social assistance and they don't have a job. It's tough luck for them. Tough luck for us. And seniors are up in arms about it, and rightly so.
What am I, Gary? Chopped liver. You don't look like chopped liver. I'm not chopped liver. Why you and I, as long-time taxpayers in this country of ours, aren't even given a second look? It is not right. You know what? And I've been paying taxes in one form or another since I was 16 when I got my first job. I've been paying taxes ever since, and I've been privileged with having a high-end career where I'm paying taxes through the teeth. And here, just a short time after I retired a year ago, I've got to watch my money. We got to watch it. We have to budget. We clearly see that things around the city and around the country are way more expensive. Why wouldn't I be eligible for something like this for the $250? It just doesn't make any sense. You know what? I'm not going to die person if I don't get that $250. I'm just kind of trying to think about the regular Joe, who's been paying taxes, feeding a family, paying rent, or living in a modest home, trying to keep up with the mortgage, who's now retired. He's 60, 65 years of age. can't work anymore for one reason or another. What, this guy doesn't deserve anything after putting in all that time and effort in raising a good family, paying his taxes and doing good for the country? I personally think it's an insulting slap in the face to Canadians. It's just rather unfortunate when you hear an announcement like this coming out, and I'm thinking about my neighbors, my elderly relatives, that they would have been able to benefit from something from this government, and at the end of the day, they're not getting anything with this. And then you're looking at Mr. Trudeau, like you were saying, sneaking his head around. Oh, let's take a look at the groceries. Oh, this is expensive. Let me get on the podium and offer everybody $250 who's making less than at 150K. You're eligible for $250. It's what I don't know what the man was thinking. I really don't. Sometimes he's bang on a lot of issues. He speaks well. He tries to govern the best he can, and you kind of behind him. But for every step forward lately, especially in his last mandate, every step forward he takes, he seems to take 2 or 3 backwards. He took 4 backwards here today, Gary. It's just not right. It's just not right.
Let me read from the Revenue Canada webpage, and it says, eligible for the tax-free $250 rebate are all Canadians, except who worked in 2023, right, earned up to $150,000 individual net income, and meet the following requirements. Filed their 2023 tax return by December 31st of this year, and claimed the tax credit for Canada Pension Plan or Quebec Pension Plan contributions on employment or self-employment earnings, claimed the tax credit for employment insurance or Quebec Parental Insurance Plan premiums on employment or self-employment earnings, or reported income from EI or QPIP benefits, are a resident of Canada on March 31st, 2025, are not incarcerated for a period of at least 90 days immediately prior to April 1st, 2025, and are not deceased on April 1st, 2025. They actually had to put that in.
No.
It's right there.
Okay.
In black and white. But are not incarcerated for a period of at least 90 days immediately prior to April 1st, 2025. So if you sat on your ass in jail for a period of time, it looks like you're going to get the check. And what do we get? That's what we get.
Yeah.
And they wonder why we're upset about this. And one of his ministers the other day said, well, we gave seniors a 10% increase in their OAS recently. Okay, so the increase in the OAS has been tied to inflation. So each year that's been, up until a year ago, had been around 2% or whatever. The 10% they gave us really would be to help soften the blow as they gave out money and to people during the pandemic, the CERB payments and everything, would be to help soften the blow because you're on a fixed income. That was then, this is now. What are you doing for me now? There are just so many things wrong with the way he has approached this. And it just makes Trudeau and the Liberals look that much more desperate as their popularity continues to tank. And, they think that we're going to jump for joy. This is the most blatant example of buying our votes with our own money in quite some time. The most blatant example of it.
Yeah.
Plus, he's PO'd all of the premiers and territorial leaders by not consulting them prior, and they don't even have the details worked out, but I think New Brunswick, the new premier in New Brunswick, was saying this is going to cost us about $25 million if the vets don't come through with some money to offset it. The other thing I'm looking at is that $250 payment is scheduled for April 1st. Well, isn't that interesting? Because it's going to cost them 18.7 million Canadian workers will qualify, they expect, for this. And there was a figure, a total figure on it, and I can't remember what it is, but it was substantial. It was, I think it was in the same range as the total cost of giving the raise to the people 65 to 74 in the OAS. Worked out to about the same amount. I thought I heard one of the, it may have been the bloc leader throwing that out the other day. Anyway, April 1st, that's the beginning of their new budget year. So this chunk of money that at least they'll say, well, okay, yeah, we're running a deficit, but it's not as bad as what we thought it was going to be, the old line. All they did was they just waited one day to move the impact of this $250 payment over to the new budget, and then they'll figure out a way to fudge, the figures and make it all look good for election year. I just get so frustrated at times with this crap. It's just crap. How stupid. Oh wait, maybe I shouldn't ask that question, because when you consider the people who A, don't vote, or B, fall hook, line, and sinker for some of the dumbest things, like, coming out of a politician's mouth. Like, I don't know. Maybe I should just go somewhere. Flicker it. I don't know.
That Trudeau, Mr. Trudeau, and his entire Liberal Party, 3 to 4 steps back. The backbenchers that were basically trying to send Mr. Trudeau off on his horse, where were they in trying to tell him, like, don't do it? Where were they in trying to hold back the leader? Don't do it.
It's obvious, though, Eddie, he's not going to listen.
Yeah, he just went on his merry way, and he did what he felt like he was going to do. Oh my God, is he starting to act like the president incoming in January just does what the hell he feels like? I mean, what, Gary? I think you're absolutely right. They're so low in the polls. They're so low on the popularity scale that they'll pull up any stunt to try to entice maybe misinformed Canadians that this is a great thing, come vote for me. I really don't know. It's a grade school stuff. This is something that you would see happen in grade school politics. I mean, yeah. He's a seasoned professional. He's been at the helm for 10 years now. 10 years? Yeah, 10 years. And you pull a stunt like this. This is a rookie stunt. I just cannot believe. The Liberal Party, and that clip that you showed with his cronies and behind him, all waving, all nodding in approval, like you typically see on that. Like, stop with that. A smack in the back of the head would have been better. I would have at least appreciated the video clip.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just so unprofessional, this entire scenario, and rightly slow. The new premier of New Brunswick. This is going to cost millions upon millions of dollars if this is not done the right way. And inform them of where the money's going to be coming from, and offset any sort of existing programs and plans. It's insane. Or could it be that they know they're going to lose the next election, and the next Prime Minister of Canada is going to have to deal with this crap?
Well, the day that the new Prime Minister walks into that office, it's going to be like a minefield, walking through a minefield.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. Anyway,
and this is the man who's going to put the consortium together in Team Canada. and
Yeah.
deal against a wheel and dealer wizard in Donald Trump and his people, good freaking luck.
Yeah, well, let's not call him wizard. He's a wheeler and dealer. I don't know how
Okay.
much of a wizard he is at
Yeah,
times.
I'll take that.
Let's-
I'll take that back.
Yeah, let's not give him
You
too
get-
much
you get
credit.
the point.
Yeah, I
You
get the point.
I mean, this is the person that's going to be leading the Team Canada approach, and whoever the premiers of the provinces assigned to this Team Canada, going against Donald Trump and his team, pulling a amateur stunt like this, and he's had 2-hour conversation with President Trump. My God, I wonder what. I wish I was a fly on the wall to listen to that.
Oh, yeah. Love to have a recording of that one. Well, Eddie, you know what?
Yeah.
Our time here is done.
No.
I can't believe. And my voice
Wow.
actually held out. I thought at one point it was going to start cracking on me, but it held off. So I guess it's time to close off for the week. Any final thoughts, Eddie, before we go?
Sounds like it was a fun week, Gary.
It was a very, very frustrating week.
You missed me, huh? It would have been nice to sit down and have a coffee and discuss this every morning, right?
Exactly. I think probably we need something a little stronger to discuss
Yeah, I
this.
think so.
Anyway. All right. For those wondering about the software used for Night Talk, it's called Ecamm, and it's like a TV production center on your Mac. And I'll include a link below if you want to have a look at it and see what it can do if you're thinking about getting into the YouTube side of things, becoming a creator, or just getting on. Because right now the big thing on YouTube is over 40s, over 50s, over 60s. There's one guy I saw the other day. He said, I started my YouTube channel and I was 80. And that's where it's going. So like we did with Facebook and drove the kids off into Instagram and elsewhere, and we're starting now with YouTube. So there is, but it's a lot of fun. And Eddie, I think you'll have to agree, we've had our, shall we say, challenges at times, technical for the most part, but it's fun. I actually look forward to doing this every week. And I'll tell you one thing, does the week ever go by quickly?
It certainly does.
Yeah, it does. So anyway, as I say, there'll be a link below for that if you want to have a look. And there will also be a link. The music that we have is from a service called Air Media. And I stumbled upon them while searching for some music a couple of years ago. And he specializes in packages, jingle packages, and music beds and that for television and radio. And great guy to deal with, Alistair. So I've put a link in down there as well. It's not a paid promotion or anything like that. It's just that I like dealing with him, and I like the product that he has turned out and what he's done for me as far as this show and another aspect of video production that I'm involved in. So those links will be there for you. And also I want to ask you to please remember to like, subscribe, and share to help our channel continue to grow, because we are on a bit of a growth spurt right now, and we want your feedback, because we want to hear what interests you, what you'd like to talk about, what you want to hear us talk about, and we want you to become involved, either leaving comments on the YouTube channel or joining us for the live shows and bringing your comments in like Deborah did this evening, and we will feature them and bring you into the conversation. This is what we want, is all around participation. So anyway, Night Talk returns in 7 days from Montreal. Good night. And Eddie?
Good night.
From?
Los Angeles and Montreal next week.
Alrighty. See you then.
Okay, bye.